Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. If a triple header wasn't good enough yesterday, how about quadruple race action today? Tour de Suisse with more action in the actual race today. A hilly stage. We'll also quickly recap Slovenia, Occitanie, and Baloise, Belgium, Tour, the three of which were all sprints. So Swiss really was the main action of the day, as well as being the only World Tour race. The news, before I get into the profile, before we start, whole of Jumbo-Visma out, gone. One of their riders apparently, or I think it's not been confirmed as it has been confirmed that one of them has COVID, but we don't know which. We don't know how many exactly. The whole team's gone. They pulled them from Swiss, and then Adam Yates has been pulled as well. He tested positive for COVID, and Ineos stated it was him, but the rest of the team stayed in the race. So it's something we've been dealing with for this is the third season, Benji. We almost forgot at the start of the year, but we're now in a situation where the Tour de France teams of the top, like two of the top three GC teams, could be vastly affected by COVID positives.
Yes, certainly. I do think that Jumbo said in his statements that it was not going to affect their Tour de France team per se. So for me, that would give the indication that Cuz is not affected, as he's the likely candidate in that team that would also be at the Tour de France when I look at their Tour de Suisse and Tour de France start lists. And then when it comes to like Adam Yates, is obviously a blow for Ineos, and I don't know what this means for their Tour de France, of course, how bad his symptoms are going to be, how his recovery is going to be, but I'm pretty sure that getting COVID 2 weeks before the Tour de France is definitely not a good thing for a ride like that.
And yeah, it's not just COVID affecting this race. There's a heat wave at the moment. Riders are pulling out left, right, and centre from Tour de Suisse. As a reminder, the extreme weather protocol doesn't exist for hot conditions, even though they're more dangerous than 5 degrees without rain in terms of dehydration and health risks. Extreme weather protocol is literally never applied because of hot conditions, at least not from what I've seen. So, yeah, riders just suffering, I guess, and the race goes on as usual. But the race itself was a world champs style course, just only 190 Ks, not 250 plus. The last half of it, up and down all day to Novazzano on the Italian border near Mendrisio. And it's like 2.5 K, 7.5% climb, finishes on an uphill kicker as well. There's I'm looking at least a dozen climbs, really hard. Remco here, Stephen Williams in the leader's jersey, full sang, Borogota, Gita, Shakman, Vlasov. Perfect course for Vlasov, who loves these up and down climbs, won Giro dell'Emilia in 2020. But before we get into the action, which there was plenty of, mention our show partner Zwift. If you need a little extra motivation to get some extra virtual elevation under your legs, just like the riders in the last half of this course, Zwift have just the thing for you with their Cask Proton mission. All you need to do is sign up to the mission and climb 2,500 meters between today and 30 June. It's about 2 weeks for your chance to win a Cask Proton icon as worn by the Ineos Grenadiers, as well as unlock the helmet for your Zwift avatar. Once you've signed up, this elevation can begin in group rides, races, or solo rides at your own pace. So head to Zwift.com to find out more. And if you haven't already signed up to Zwift, you can start a 7-day free trial and do that Cask Return mission as well. But Sylvain Dillier, Benji, honouring the Swiss national champs jersey, last man standing of that breakaway in the heat today.
Yes, certainly. A pretty decent breakaway with Turgis, Kamp, Jacobs, and Imhoff. Those are riders that can do some damage in a breakaway, but Dillier was definitely the strongest there, held on the hilly circuit we had towards the end of this route, and it was really when the peloton started picking it up with multiple teams doing stuff in the peloton. Like at a certain point, UAE was spacing, Stephen Williams was being dropped, and that's the GC leader. So goodbye, Stephen. It was nice to meet you. But for the rest of the race, Ineos started picking it up, and when Ineos started picking it up, it seemed like a better tempo than all the teams that were at the front before. And it was really when Van Baarle started being in first position that I saw more damage to the peloton on these circuits. And what point in the race did you feel like the race properly opened up with actual important riders dropping?
It wasn't when Van Baarle was pacing. He actually was keeping the gap pretty tight. Yeah, it was 115 to 106 to Dillier. It was with like 20 Ks to go or so. Not sure which climb exactly. It was when Chris Neylands, the man who attacked on Poggio in 2018 and then towed Nibali, who countered Benji's favourite Domestique for Nibali. He's actually really talented. He's like 27, 28. Anyway, Israel, I should have mentioned this where I've moved, by the way. Like, I ran into them, I didn't speak to them or anything, but I saw them pass by getting a coffee the other day. They're all here. A couple of weeks ago, Impey and Co. at altitude. And I just think it's very obvious when all the teams come back from altitude and they're peaking right. And it looks like everyone in Israel is firing because Neelands goes to the front and he just shreds. Well, yeah, he shreds it. And he did a long pull for Fulsang. Now, Fulsang had to move himself up, and Impey was even there, and it was Remco Evenepoel dropping. He's got Masnada around him. Asgren, I think, is out. He had a cut in his knee or something. So a terrible day for Quickstep with Remco dropping that far from the finish on a day which to suit him, Benji. Like, European Champs course is not too dissimilar to this, maybe not as steep, but dropping okay, Naelan shredded it, Benji, but it was still 50 deep. Like, Kuhn was still there.
Yeah, like Impey was dropping at the same time, so it definitely was not at the moment that Remco Evenepoel should be dropping on a parcours like this. It's arguably at a moment where he should be in the offensive. It's an early moment to attack in this race, and he definitely was not able to do that as he was dropping. Masnada was waiting, Van Wilder were waiting, and they basically had a three-man train pacing after the group of favorites being led by Israel over the top of that Pedrinate climb, and they kept that up. The last 2 kilometers of this climb were the steepest spot, so it's not easy to keep the gap if you're dropped on that steep part to the top, but that descent can offer some leveraging coming back, and it felt like the tempo of the peloton reduced a tiny bit in the descent, and by the time you reach the next climb, which is the smaller, not so steep climb in the circuit, it seemed like Remco had come back. Someone mentioned that it might have been Remco that was passing Kovi as if he was on the floor, so I definitely checked the footage, and it wasn't Remco that was back in the group, together with Masnada and Van Wilder by the bottom, and that means that he had a weak moment. He was able to come back after that first Pedrinate climb. And like, what does that mean? Does that mean he had a weak moment and can do it again? Or will he drop on the next climb that matters? And I'm afraid that it was leaning more towards the second of that, right?
Yeah, the pace went up again. Ineos had 4 riders, maybe 3 at that point. Thomas, Peacock, and Danny Martinez. Bora had Vlasov, Egita, Sharkman. Fulsang was running out of helpers though, and eventually at the end of that climb attacked, reducing the group down to 5 riders. And Remco is gone. You see him doing his own pace. We know he's going to lose big time, and he must have lost a lot because he ended up losing 2 minutes today when there was a lot of finessing in the final 5-6 kilometers of this stage. Fulsang goes over the top, and I'm like, what's the plan here? Because he's got 3 Bora, 3 Ineos, multiple EF, I think. It's got a descent and a false flat section. What's the plan? Because he had the best legs in my view, and well, the plan was just be stronger than everybody because Sharkman attacked on the descent. Pidcock marked him. He goes into his wheel. Doesn't help Sharkman. Doesn't pull at all, which was curious on the descent. Sharkman then had a mechanical and stopped, and Fulsang was having to chase on the descent. So the problems being isolated began immediately. And I was like, why didn't Pidcock relay? Maybe he's too far back on GC. I didn't really get it. Obviously, Vlasov's in the wheel behind. Sharkman's lost 55 seconds, so he's behind Thomas on GC. And anyway, they come back from Fulsang, and then I'm like, okay, attacks are going to roll, right? Like, Egita's going to counter. Nope. Vlasov's going to counter. Nope. Danny Martinez. Nope. And literally stalled. And everyone was just looking at each other like, what's going to happen? Eventually, Sharkman went again, and Fulsang closes it a second time. Peacock in the wheel again. Thomas there. And Fulsang, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. 3 Bora, 3 Ineos. Fulsang rides away on the flat. Yeah, beautiful moto draft, of course, but no one's in his wheel on the flat. And like Fulsang, strong rider, great form right now. He doesn't have big punch and kind of inexcusable, really. And eventually Vlasov and Thomas and Paulus bridge across to him. Martinez is getting dropped behind. He didn't have a good day either. Peacock struggling. And they get back to Fulsang. Sharkman returns. And eventually there was another stalemate, Benji. It looked to me, Benji, like it took a good 90 seconds for Sharkman and Vlasov to figure out what the plan was.
Yes, certainly. And I think it's also a mindset of who's in the group there, who can actually win the sprint here if they come down to it. And if, for example, Schachman starts spacing for Vlasov behind in the group with Pidcock, then they're basically delivering Pidcock to a potential sprint finish if he doesn't drop in the climbs to come. So they got to think about, okay, the stage as well. And I think they perhaps were trying to figure out a situation where they could get ahead, not have faster riders in the group, and manage to get something out of that. But that kind of counters the stuff that happens later then on the false sled uphill when it all goes stalemate again, because then they're with like 5 on a climb. Martinez is dropping behind. They're in that group with Thomas, Vlasov, Fulsang. Paulus has bridged up, like you mentioned. Like, Schachman is there. Like, what happens from that point onwards? You know that Paulus is a faster rider on paper when it comes to those finishes. Vlasov as well. We know that Schachman has had a bit of trouble when it comes to finishing off races ever since he had that very good Basque Country like a few years ago. And when it comes to Thomas, I wouldn't have rated his sprint against the likes of a Vlasov, for example, in a finish like this. But what are they going to do? If Thomas attacks, then the others will respond. And the benefit for Thomas is just sitting in, I think, hoping that Martinez doesn't lose as much time, hoping that a Pidcock perhaps magically shows up in the wheel again. But when it comes to Bora, it's a situation where they, I guess, wanted to try and win the stage and try and gain time in GC, but I don't know. I think they were also not necessarily needed to ride at that point, because like, what are they going to benefit? Yeah, they're going to gain more time on Remco Evenepoel that is 2 minutes behind.
Martinez.
Thomas, yeah, but do you still
don't know
consider
how he
him a
goes if it
GC
cools
favorite?
down in the high altitude.
He's not looking that great, to be honest.
Yeah, he doesn't look good. I get what you mean, but I think it's very simple. With Schachman having lost that much time, he has to go straight to the front and ride for Vlasov. Vlasov was pacing them in the little uphill finish, and Schachman does a reverse lead out, continues it going. I'm surprised Schachman didn't go straight to the front, because Vlasov is very fast. He's got Fulsang in the wheel, Thomas third wheel. Paulus makes a pivotal mistake. Maybe was the fastest. He goes onto Thomas wheel, fourth wheel, and then when Fulsang kicks, Vlasov kicks, he's way faster, and Paulus is equally as fast, but he has to wait behind Thomas, come out of the draft, and it's just too late. Vlasov winning the uphill sprint, which isn't a surprise. Like, this is what he is good at. He's really good at the punchy stuff. This year he won a Romandy. No, he didn't win. Higuita won. Higuita nearly chopped him. He was second in that Romandy uphill sprint. He was third in Flèche Wallonne. He was decent in Liège. And when you look at him in Astana when he was 24, he was really good in Gran Piemonte, Lombardia, Emilia. So, like, this is bread and butter for Vlasov. And what I want to see is him in the high mountains in the next couple of days. But big gaps for such a stage, a really good stage, I have to say. Like, it was a little bit... took a little bit for the race to get going, but this was a good one. Vlasov winning ahead of Paulus, Fulsang third, Thomas fourth, then Ulisi fifth on 5 seconds. Bora had 4, and they let Fulsang. They had Groschardt, they had 4. Wow. He was there in a group with Kung, so unbelievable from Kung, 7th, Agita 8th, Schachman 9th, Reichenbach 10th. So you look at those names, like, if Kung is there, and a great performance, don't get me wrong, Paris stage 8 good too, but like, Remco, there's something wrong with that performance if he's getting dropped that badly. Other casualties, Martinez lost 53. Again, Peacock lost 37. So GC, Vlasov goes into the lead, 6 seconds out of Fulsang, 7 seconds out of Thomas. Thomas looking like the best Ineos rider by far. And tomorrow we have the first mountain test to Muzalp. Locarno to Muzalp, 2 big climbs, 181 Ks. First one, they do the Nerthenen Pass, 13.6 at 7.8%. There's a little bit of false start before, to 2,500 meters. It is steep in the 11th kilometer, about 10%, and then long descent and false slight descent. Huge valley, actually. Let me have a look at this. 50, 60k valley. That's an issue. Then moves up 17.7 Ks at 7.6%. Pretty steady. Levels off in the last 2 Ks. I'd expect differences to be made in the 8th and 9th kilometers. The attacks to start there and continue until the 14th, 15th kilometer in that climb. So I like Fulsang. I think he goes into the leader's jersey, and I think he wins the stage.
Ooh, that's a likable strategy for Israel, I would say. When it comes to this parkour, it's like you mentioned it. It's also a quest to see what Vlasov can offer on a parkour like this. I'm very curious to see what will occur in regards to that, because I don't think the tempo on that Newfoundland Pass will be that high because it's so far from the finish line. But it would not surprise me, like, which teams are going to control this. When it comes to Ineos, I don't think their confidence is high enough when it comes to Thomas for winning this GC. So the only person that I'm looking at is perhaps an overconfident Bora. Or do you actually consider Israel capable of thinking, okay, we're going to control this race and we're going to go for it on a mountain stage for Fulsang, knowing that he's got
100%.
the history of a puncher?
100%.
I don't know.
Fulsang's on. He's on.
I,
Look at him at Mercantour out Maritime. He's on. Look at him today.
I,
The confidence taking it up. They'll pace.
I will even a breakaway as well on one end, to be honest.
Breakaway might win, but I think Israel are going to try. I think they think Fulsang might have it here. I think Ineos too will ride for Thomas. Thomas is good at this stuff, right?
Well, the thing with Thomas is like, is it because the other riders are worse than Ineos that we're praising him so much as the one rider, or is it because he's good enough to be there? Okay, but this is also a hill stage.
Would you have expected Thomas to make that Fulsang Vlasov group and to be bridging back?
I wouldn't in this stage. Yes, I rated him more.
I mean, generally, given his form of the last 18 months.
In the last month, yes. Before, no.
Yeah, I think they have to, and maybe they use Martinez. Like, what's he on now? He's deep in GC. He's probably on close to 2 minutes, and let me have a look where he is. He's on 154. So do they pace with Martinez? Is he domestique? Does he attack early? Just try and get the break? Does he go on the first climb? I don't know. It could be an interesting stage. I think, I really think Fulsang will try again. Naylands will launch it for him.
Do we know what's happening with Yoni Zagiri? Because he lost so much time initially in this race, and now he came back to 14th here. Is it a rider that could be in the breakaway tomorrow, perhaps? That's an option I see in the breakaway. But if it comes down to like the peloton group, I'm going to still rate Vlasov over Fulsang.
Maybe. I mean, it's Evenepoel's on 222. We haven't heard what's gone wrong with him. Got Pino on 626. Masnada on 904. I'm looking for climbers. Quentin Pacher, 11 minutes. Lukashenko, 11 minutes. As you said, Izagir on 30. That's maybe a bit too much. Murdosa, 1853. Brambilla, 404. That's just a weird gap. Like, just go to 8 minutes, man. Carthy as well on 239. I wouldn't be surprised if Carthy moves up a lot tomorrow. No, it's not true. I think it's too hot and he's not in good form.
I'm questioning a tiny bit, like, when it comes to this race, when we started off, we were thinking, okay, Vlasov should prove himself in the mountains and so forth, but we're now coming towards those mountains, and he's up against the likes of a Geraint Thomas and a Jakob Fulsang for those mountains to fight for a GC here. Is that even indicative if he beats them for the Tour de France? Because, in all honesty, Fulsang and Thomas are not the riders I see as podium candidates right now.
No. Well, Thomas, maybe. I mean, if Ineos can do a miracle and have half the field OTL or crash out in Denmark, then maybe Thomas. But you're right, Benji. It depends on the watts. Like, maybe he does his own full gas effort and it's some really, really high level performance, and then it is relevant. Certainly, if he's dropped by Fulsang or Thomas, that's a really big problem for him. Because, as you said, Roglic, Pogačar, Vingegaard is a whole different beast on climbs like this. So it's really a stage that I can't wait to watch, even though the organisers have made it as difficult to watch as possible. But that's all. Anyway, we'll wait to see what happened with Remco. Shame with the COVID stuff as well. It really sucks. I would have imagine GC Koos tomorrow, Benji. Like, that is a shame. Or Yates.
Yep. I think when it comes to GC Cuz, I'm most intrigued because I wanted to see what his form was going to be, even if he wasn't a GC Cuz, just to see what he will be for Jumbo. And when it comes to Dennis, same story. And it really draws question marks when it comes to some Tour de France teams now, like with Ineos, like with Jumbo. And I guess we'll be figuring out in the coming days if it will affect their teams and how much their teams will be affected from the stuff that happened the last 2 weeks in Dauphiné and Tour de Suisse. Because, like, it's not only Adam Yates, like, Martinez's leadership role is also, like, I'd argue for the mountains, he's still, like, all-out leader and so forth. But, like, I added a question mark to his name this week.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to rate this Swiss. I find it weirder to assess than Criterium du Dauphiné, to be honest, where I just mentally could line it up a bit more. Anyway, that was Swiss. We'll move on to the 3 sprint stages just quickly. Route d'Occitanie, it was the Arnaud Demar show, Groupama FDJ doing what they do best on this sort of sprint stage for Demar, cleaning up the sprint. Viviani, really deep, struggled. I was looking forward to seeing what Tesson could do for Saint-Michel-Aubert, 90 3, Aubert 93. Yeah, I had to practice. I was in France. I had to order petrol. I was getting petrol, and I was like, "Fuck, what's 95?" And I was like, 80. And I told him 85, but he knew what, the boy hooked me up. He knew what I meant. I forgot the D's. Anyway, Demar wins. Tesson was angry. He was shouting at an Israel rider. Who was he shouting at? I'm trying to look at. It was really Barbie, I think, but it was Viviani that cut him off. Anyway, there's nothing really of note to say there other than tomorrow. 154 Ks, sort of punchers finish in Occitanie, a really important race for points. And Valverde's here, Benji, but I'm not convinced of his shape. I think they're just sending him to everything. He's not in that good shape. Like, I don't know. Like, do you think he'll top 3 tomorrow? Because he really should.
Honestly, I hope for a pretty good result when it comes to Valverde. It's a mixed parcours, but on paper, it should on paper fit him. It's like, when it comes to the team that they've got, you'd expect them to try and at least control it somewhat, but they've also not really had the team at the start list here that is going to control this entire race. Like, when it comes to Sosa, he's here as a domestique also when it comes to Valverde, I think, on certain terrains, but would you argue that he's going to be so valuable in catching a breakaway, for example? Abner Gonzalez, Holman in Counter. Counter is here for the sprints. Holman could be the flatter guy, Erviti flatter guy, Elos Guy. Like, these are not the top level domestiques when it comes to Movistar. So it's really the question when it comes to controlling that I'm asking. But also, like, this finish, do you see Nairo options, or is it not steep enough or not long enough?
Nah, not hard enough, I don't think. I'm going with a rider you might have heard of, Attila Valter. I think he should really do well here on this sort of finish. And yeah, see how he goes. I think VT's the good flat engine of Movistar, and he's kind of banged up. He's still injured. So anyway, look for Volta tomorrow, kind of uphill finish. Shouldn't be too decisive on GC. Famous last words. Slovenia was a sprint, very, very messy, hilly race, but not as hilly as the Dauphiné. And Groenewegen got the job done. He got a lead out from Mesgets and Stewart. Merlier was dropped. Ackermann just did not have the top end. Hamino actually came late second for Alps and Phoenix. Ackermann third. Fiorelli and Kolnagi, absolute shit show for Bardiani. All over the place. Can't believe there wasn't a crash. The 2 purple Bardiani riders just all, yeah. And eventually, it looks like Kolnagi should be leading up Fiorelli to me. And tomorrow's stage there is it's the same as the first stage, kind of. Svettina, 5.2k, 7.7% with 30k's to go, 25k's to go, and they descend, and they got 2k, 7% finish. Pogacar can win it very easily if he wants to, but yeah, do you reckon he'll want to, or he'll want Micah to carry the jersey another day?
I feel like he'll want to try at least. I see him attacking on that climb, but also when it comes to like this stage, Groenewegen, I wanted to add that he properly cleaned that up, and like Ackermann losing from Tamigno is not exactly the most precious thing at the moment. Govikar of Bahrain got kind of blocked in. I was curious to see what was going to happen there, but nothing happened as a consequence because he couldn't get to the front anymore. But like, these sprints don't say much about Groenewegen either, although he just cleans it up. Like, this was with utter ease that he won this sprint, in my opinion, right?
Yeah, this was like when he kicked, you just see Ackermann could do nothing and gone. And Ackermann, I know, I'm sure he got a nice paycheck, but his Palmares rather won't thank him for that move, I don't think, which is funny because he left Bora Benji because he got left out of the tour squad. So like, money does solve problems if things you're not happy with. If you're like, well, if you're not going to take me to the tour, at least pay me absolute bank. And yeah, obviously no complaint. I don't think he's going to the tour. The last race, 4th of the day, Baloise Belgium Tour from Beveren to Nokkerheist, just 175 Ks, punchy uphill finish. And Jasper Philipsen got the job done. He's hard to deny multiple days in a row. Van Poppel second, Danny Van Poppel, like, please. Pedersen third, De Lee fourth, Vermeers fifth, Dainese sixth, Jakobsen seventh, Hofstede eighth, and Yolkowski ninth, and Gerben Thijssen 10th. What I want to ask is, Benji, Jakobsen 7th. I don't think he'll be as consistent as Cav in the Tour. I'm not saying Cav would be better. I'm saying the Quick-Step train is worse than last year.
I agree with that, and I felt like it somewhat fell apart in the last kilometer, and it brought Jakobsen into a position where he started sprinting, and he just couldn't really come out towards the end. Then, when it comes to Philipsen, he's able to like go through gaps way more than I see Jakobsen able to, and perhaps that's still a thing from what happened to him in the past. But when it comes to Philipsen, I feel like he's literally going for gaps that don't exist and just goes through them like it's nothing. And in this finish, it's like a finish like right at like the coast where the last 100 meters are like still a bit uphill, and it like goes from like flat to uphill in the last 100 meters again. And I feel like people probably underestimate that last punch at which Philipsen was still able to go because he went out of the wheel of the others later. And when it comes to Pedersen, he was at the front really early, which often helps him, but sometimes it's too early, and therefore a Philipsen can accelerate past, for example, and have Van Poppel on that final stretch. But the least certainly with a better result than yesterday. Good to see him up there. Good to see him up there with the top sprinters here. I'm curious, like, I didn't specifically watch the lead during this final sprint. Was there anything you noticed when it comes to, like, was he boxed in at certain points? Could he even do better on a finish like this?
I think positioning timing is pivotal, and I still think, I mean, he's learning. He's like 20 years old. I think he has the power to win this sort of finish. But yeah, like same with Van Poppel. I think if Van Poppel gets his own lead out, he can win this finish. But he didn't. He's in incredible form. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Tour. I don't know what happened to Bennett, whether he got dropped or mechanical or what. Tomorrow's stage, 12K flat TT from Scherpenheuvel-Zeichem, whatever that is. Struggle with that one. It's not the strongest TT start list here. I'm looking for Rune Herkotz to top 3, probably. Maybe he's not powerful enough. I'm looking for Philipsen to top 5. But Valscheid, Campenaerts, Wellens, Lampart, anyone else? Is Søren here? He's not. So who do you like for this TT?
Well, the thing with Campenaerts is that he moved towards that cobble type of rider rather swiftly, and we don't really know what to expect in that regard to his time trials again. What I'm curious in is that I want to see what Thibaut Nys can do in a time trial, because this guy's a pretty talented young rider. He's only 19. He's going to Trek next year, and he's a bit of a punchy type that can also do the cobble terrain, cyclocrosser, and we know that Van Aert was a good time trialist when he got straight into these races, these Belgian races, I think in Eco Tour, where I think Tony Martin beat him by a bit or something on a time trial, or Van Aert did well on a time trial at that point in life. And Van der Poel's initial time trials were also pretty promising. So does that mean that Thibaut Nys can also make that move and have a decent time trial? I don't know. In the Baloise Belgium Tour last year, he didn't show it necessarily, but I just want to see something from this guy. And perhaps it's more for the upcoming stages afterwards than this specific stage that I'm looking at that personally. But yeah, next to the names you said, like, on paper, we want to see those riders do something. And would you argue that, Brent Lensofov, those are like the top 10 riders, and perhaps it's too short for that. But I'm going to go for Pedersen, because why not?
He has to top, if he doesn't top 3 this, then what's he going to do in the Tour where you've got Ganna, Wout van Aert, MVDP, who else am I missing? Anyway, big engines. If he doesn't top 3 this, then struggles. I think Valscheid will top 3, and I'm struggling to really, I don't know what Lampart's form is like. I'd love to see Valscheid win it. Maybe he's just not quite good enough. But yeah, Philipsen as well. Remember that UAE Tour TT? Just watch out for Philipsen, another man who I think is sneaky capable of taking yellow at some point in the first week.
Was Philipsen the guy that was descending in a arrow position or something on a time trial bike or something? Or I remember something vague like that last year at an Eco Tour or something where he was doing something crazy.
Maybe. I mean, I'm trying to remember back to his junior days. Wasn't he a good time trialist back in the day? So yeah, he's got the pedigree. He's just been a sprinter. So that's something to watch. But that's all from us today. Quadruple header again tomorrow. Our work's cut out in the heat wave. Maybe we'll have some ice water now. Thanks to you all. Thanks to Zwift for supporting the podcast, and we'll see you at the recaps tomorrow. Ciao.